Hello, welcome back to Asking the Scriptures. We are now in part 4 of our study of the letter of Paul to the Romans. Alright, so this will be a discussion or study of chapter 2 verses 16 to 29. So the title of our study for today is A True Jew is in the Heart. Right? So let's review first what we studied last time. The title was The Righteous Judgment of God on Jews and Non-Jews. But the Apostle Pablo was addressing more specifically his fellow Jews here in chapter 2. We only had a couple of points back then. God will judge sinners who judge were sinners, so he was talking about his fellow Jews. Letter B, God will reward or punish all without partiality, whether Jew or non-Jew. So we will have 3 points for today. So letter A, Gentiles will be judged with the law that they had. Alright? So let's read verse 12. For all who have sinned without the law will also perish without the law, and all who have sinned under the law will be judged by the law. So again, I want you to be familiar with these common Greek terms that we will be encountering all throughout the letter. Well, some of them actually all throughout the scriptures, especially the New Testament. So what is this law? So this is the law of Moshe. Who did the Jews consider people without the law? Not just the Jews actually, but the scriptures, okay? So this talks about the Gentiles. 2 verses later, in verse 14, Paul clarified this, for when Gentiles who do not have the law, so you find it there, without the law, and here in verse 14, who do not have the law, by nature do what the law requires, they are allotted themselves even though they do not have the law. Does this include non-moral creatures like animals? No. Paul was specifically talking about people only, okay? Why will they perish? Well, it's because they have sinned. This was addressed in chapter 1. Were the Jews judging them by their law? I think they did. But remember, the law was also based on the universal moral law. Okay, so even the law of Moshe did not come out of a vacuum, even though there were specific items there that were very new to them. But largely, like murder, stealing, adultery, they were all sinful. They all knew that. But of course, as discussed before, the law of Moshe was a formalization. They need to encode a law that they would need as a nation. But of course, God did it for them. All right. So is it fair to judge the people by the law when they were not under it or aware of it? So this is what Paul has been driving in verse 12. They didn't have the law of Moshe, and therefore they will not be judged under the law of Moshe. So it's not fair to be judged by that law. They were not aware of that law. So specifically, the law of the Shabbat didn't apply to the Gentiles and other stuff. But of course, worshiping the only one true God, they had to observe that. Who are those under the law? So basically, these are the Israelites. Okay? What word matches perish? So we have a parallel here in the first line, perish, and the second line is judge. Of course, when you're judged, the sentence will be guilty and you will perish. So the idea is just the same. Is there any Jew who have not sinned? Definitely nobody. Everybody sinned. All right? Are they scared of being judged by the law? Well, talk about the Gentiles since they were not aware of it. They were not thinking of it. They were not scared of it. Specifically that Paul mentioned here that they would not be judged under the law. So before we go to verse 13, I'd like us to look at the Greek words that will give us an idea of what we're talking about here. So we said that law is nomos, and again we have the alpha at the beginning or as a prefix of nomos in the first line, anomos. So without the law. Hamartano, okay, before I told you that hamartia is sin, and the study of sin in theology is hamartiology. And krino keeps on popping up in our study, so I think you are familiar with this by now. So let's go to verse 13. For it is not the hearers of the law, okay, nomos again, who are righteous before God, but the doers of the law who will be justified. So we find here verse 1, first line, contrasting the second line. Okay, so now Paul was addressing here the Jews themselves. Okay, why does merely hearing the law make no one righteous? So we find here hearing of the law. Now, of course, way back then, they didn't have the privilege of having many copies of the written law. because it was very difficult to produce written documents way back then. Even the parchments were very expensive. So they really had to rely on the reading of the law by their scribes and their experts. Now, what verses in the law echoes this hearing of the law? When you say hearing of the law, this really sounds a bell to them, because we know in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verses 4 to 6, this is called the Shema, because the word hear or listen is Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Yahweh our Elohim, the Yahweh is one. You shall love the Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. So basically, Paul was alluding to this. You see, the problem is they just remained in the hearing part. That's why he said the doers of the law, because you don't listen only for the sake of listening, but you have to apply the law in your hearts. Did Pablo call the Jews not righteous before God? Essentially, yes, because they have sinned and they did not do the law. They did not fulfill, they did not obey the law. Would the Jews protest for being accused of not doing the law? Probably many of them will, especially the leaders themselves. Although many of their leaders would accuse their fellow Jews, their common ones, of not fulfilling the law because they felt very righteous themselves. After 12 verses, what did Moshe say after commanding them to hear? This is the important part, doing the law. So let's jump to verse 18. So this is about 12 verses. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of the Yahweh. They explicitly stated there, do what is right and good. So the application is here. All right? So in the earlier part, of course, of the verse, what is being emphasized is understanding the law, listening to it, and now, of course, applying it. That it may go well with you, and that you may go in and take possess of the good land that the Yahweh swore to give to your fathers. So application of the law is very important. What does God expect of the Jews after listening to the law? We have it here, to do what is right and what is good. Can you do the law without listening to it first? Of course not. You will have to rely on the natural law, right? The moral law, which is common to everybody. But God wanted to have more law for them, because having a relationship is much more than natural law. They needed, what I mean by natural law is the universal law, the moral law, not law of physics, okay? So God wants them to know Him better. That's why they needed more items about the law, and that is through the law of Moshe. If doers of the law will be justified, does that mean that justification is by works? No. No. Remember last time we said that we quoted James or Jacob, that faith must be accompanied with works. So faith is not alone. Faith must be expressed with your actions. So let us not skip that part. If you really have faith in the Lord, you should have works. The faith will produce those works. So if you really believe it, you will do it. So this is not works or justification. Remember the word justification, its root word is also from dikaios. Alright? Paul wasn't teaching here, the doers of the law who will be justified, he wasn't teaching here that you will be made righteous or declared righteous just because you did the work of the law. The important thing here is it manifests in your life that you really are following the Yahweh, right? Are there Christians who are fond of listening to preachings and teachings yet do not do what they have learned? Oh, many of us are guilty of this, right? So we have to always be conscious that we should apply the law in our lives, not live a hypocritical life, or we have a hidden life that displeases God. Let's be careful of that. It's good to listen to a lot of preachings and teachings, of course. I teach a lot, but I have to apply this in my life as well before I teach it to you. All right? Verse 14. For when Gentiles who do not have the law, so it's clear here that those people without the law are the Gentiles, by nature, so we have the word physis, that's why we have the word physics in our modern times, by nature do what the law requires. They are a law to themselves even though they do not have the law. Are we Filipinos Gentiles? Yes, we're not Jews. Do Christians have the law? The New Testament is a new covenant, okay? That's why it's called New Testament, New Covenant. But it doesn't mean it's disconnected from the old. But its application is very updated, should I say. there are many items in the old covenant, of course, that cannot be brought into the new because the new has already ended that, because the Lord Jesus Christ already sacrificed his life for our sins. So there are continuity and discontinuity from the old to the new. So when it comes to the law of Moshe, like it talks about how you behave in the land, those are very limited, okay, because we don't live in the land of Israel. We don't live in the ancient times, okay, we live in the modern times after the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that's why there are many of the law of Moshe that are not applicable anymore, especially the ritual ones. Of course, those things that begin from the universal moral law that continued to the Mosaic law and continues to the New Testament law. Of course, they will forever be part of our law. Does that mean Gentiles are righteous while the Jews are not? Now, it would appear, if you just read this sentence here, verse 14, that the Gentiles are righteous because it says here, by nature, they do what the law requires. Well, obviously, not everybody, or of course, in general terms, they failed. Okay? But what Paul was driving here is that they had a law. They had a law. This is the very point. Okay? So let's not go beyond what Paul was trying to say here. He wasn't saying that they will be justified because of the works of the law. He's just saying they had a law, even though they didn't have the Mosaic law. All right? Are the Gentiles then without any kind of law? No, they always had law, even from the time of Adam. God gave him a law. Therefore, what law covers them? Okay, that's we call universal moral law. So how many kinds of laws are being referred here? So we had the universal moral law, the law that the Gentiles had. Of course, we have the Mosaic law, or the law from Moshe. That's basically the two categories we find here. Does this contradict the Old Testament? No, it doesn't. In fact, the Old Testament specifies more items that the universal law, moral law, doesn't have. That's the privilege of being under the Mosaic law. Is this also true for people from Adam to Moshe, or before Moshe? That's what we find in chapter 5, verse 14. Okay, let's read the verse first. Yet death reigned from Adam to Moshe. The reason why that's spelled differently because in other parts of the New Testament, you don't have the upsilon, but here in Romans, you have the upsilon, Moshe. Even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come. Okay, right now, as believers, normally we divide the era to Old Testament and New Testament. Okay, because, the Lord Jesus Christ, his coming, his death and resurrection marked a new era. All right? But during the time of the Old Testament, for them, the deciding point was the giving of the law. So it's either you're under the law of Moshe or you're outside of it. That included people who lived before the time that the law of Moshe was given. And also people who are Gentiles, outsiders, not within the covenant people of God. So everyone else have a different law. We have a better law. So with that kind of thinking, you would notice that they would only be thinking of those people under the law and those who are not under the law. All right? But that has changed when Christ came. Okay? It's either you are in Christ, whether you had the Old Testament law, Mosaic law, or you had the universal moral law. The ones who lived from Adam to Moshe, or actually prior to the giving of the law by Moshe. All right? So it didn't matter whether you have under these two kinds of laws that are mentioned here. All right? That's the difference that the New Testament has made because of the death and resurrection of the Lord Yeshua. Verse 15, they showed that the work of the law is written on their hearts, while their conscience also bears witness, and their conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. Was there a time people did not have any kind of the law? No. All human beings have always have a kind of a law. And we're all actually under the universal moral law. Now, of course, we have the law of Christ, which is better than the universal moral law. But that's for another discussion. Who wrote the law in the hearts of the Gentiles? Come to think of it, it's not said here, but it is already written. So since the law came from the Lord, we would expect that this would be God. So even though it's not inscripted in stones or in any document, They know it internally. That's, I think, the point. As you grow as a child, you know that there is such a thing as right and wrong. Okay, your parents teach you about it, you grow about it, and even if you're in a very remote tribe, they will have a law. We mentioned that some time ago. Okay, is this literal or figurative? Of course, this is figurative because when you open the literal heart, you don't expect to find an inscription of the law on their heart. So this is figurative. Did the Jews write the law in their hearts? They should have, but they did not. Okay? What it means is when you hear the law, you should keep it. So that's figurative of writing the law in your heart. That means you have to take it seriously and you have to apply it. Okay? The problem is they did not, or they ignored it. We have here from the prophet Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 33, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Yahweh. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their Elohim or God, and they shall be my people. So that's the difference between the old and the new. That the law is already internalized. Unlike the old, it was written on tablets of stones and eventually in documents. In this case, they will not be able to forget the law of the Lord since it's in their hearts. Now, let's not push too much the point of Paul here. Paul was simply stating that they knew the law because it's written in their hearts. That's the simple point of Paul. So, of course, many Gentiles did not obey the law that they had in their hearts, but they knew it in their hearts. Why should the law be written in their hearts? Now, if you look at Psalm 37 verse 31 and 119 verse 34, the point is to be able to apply it. Did all Gentiles show the works of the law? Certainly not. Paul was just saying here that they knew it. All right? Do all people have conscience? Yes, of course, because it's part of what God has made us. But of course, when you keep on sinning, this is what the scriptures call callous hearts or searing of heart. That means your conscience becomes so hard that it stops telling you if you are doing the right thing or not. So once you hear the law, if you did it, now your conscience is clear. Even if people accuse you of wrongdoing, your conscience is clear. But if you didn't do it or you violated it, your conscience is going to bother you. It's going to bug you. But some people, they don't want to be bugged by their own conscience. They sear their conscience. They don't listen to their conscience until it comes to a time that they don't have a conscience anymore. The conscience doesn't disappear, but it has become seared or calloused. That's the problem. What role does it play? The verse says here, it bears witness. Si martireo, we know martireo is to witness, but sim is with the conscience together with what the law says. So the conscience uses what it knows, the law. When you look at the Greek word there, syneidesis, again, the word sin is with, and desis is to know. There's another word that commonly used for know is gnosis, but in this also means know. So you know it in your conscience. We have another Greek word here, written, graptos, that's where we got graphe. Bear witness for what? Bear witness for the law. So if you did what is right, it will bear witness in your favor. But if not, it will condemn you. What happens when people do not listen to the witness of the conscience? Of course, they eventually lose their sense of right and wrong. So that's what we talked about a while ago, searing the conscience or calloused conscience. Can conscience be restored? I believe so. Because the Lord can soften your heart. He talked about it, discussed this previously. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24 to 26, that God will remove the stone of heart from within us and He'll give us a soft. Do all people have thoughts? Oh, certainly. Remember, Paul was discussing, or at least addressing, who are adults here. He's not talking about, that's the next question, how about children and mentally deficient? Of course, they're exempted. That's why even within the Jewish community, they had this bar mitzvah, coming of age ceremony. But that's at the age of 13. Even in other cultures, they have this coming of age ceremony, usually at the age of 12. It depends upon the culture, actually. Okay? So why thoughts conflict? It's because sometimes we are tempted to deny the law, to disrespect it, and to disobey it. And so that's why it says there, conflicting thoughts accuse or even excuse them. So when will their thoughts accuse them or excuse them? Of course, when you do what is wrong, it will accuse you. And if you do what is right, it will excuse you. That means you're clear of any wrongdoing. So we have there the thoughts, logismo. Of course, we are familiar with the word logos, which is usually word, so logic. Accuse is interesting here, but of course, this used to mean different compared to our times. Kategoreo, category. Okay, it's interesting. Of course, this means different now in English. Apolegeomai, so this is also where we get the word apologetics, which is to answer. But in this case, of course, we know in the context it means excuse. So again, we have to be careful. Just because they're familiar to us, it doesn't mean it means the same thing. You have to take it meaning during way back then, depending on the context. We are now in verse 16. On that day when, according to my gospel, God judges the secrets of men by Christo Yeshua. So who else knows the thoughts of people? We have here in Proverbs 15:26, the thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Yahweh, but gracious words are pure. So obviously, God knows our thoughts, even those secret thoughts. What does my gospel foretell? This is the coming judgment of God. So eventually, when people don't meet the deadline of repenting and submitting to the Lord Yeshua, of course, there will be judgment because eventually they will keep on sinning, right? That's the idea. They keep on rejecting God. So there's a deadline. Is this new or unexpected? Actually, no. Many people know that there is an ultimate judgment coming to all people, which hasn't happened yet, but we know it's coming. Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 14, for Elohim will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So there, God knows the secret things that people have, all people. So that's how sovereign God is. That's how omniscient God is. When we proclaim the gospel, are we judging people? No. It says here it's God who's going to judge people. We're just messengers. God judges the secrets of men. We don't know the secrets of men. When we proclaim the gospel, and somehow the gospel touches their secrets, and they react a little bit, they know that their secrets have been revealed by God to them, even though it's not revealed to us. We cannot read minds, of course. When they listen to our proclamation, what happens to their conscience and thoughts? So there, we said a while ago, the conscience probably begins to talk to them again. And their thoughts, again, are challenged, especially when their thoughts are twisted, because the gospel, again, shows them what is wrong and what is right. So whatever happens in our hearts, because those are the three internal parts that were mentioned in the previous verse: hearts, conscience, and thoughts. So because of the power of God, because of the gospel, our conscience again begins to speak to us. That's the power of God. So that's letter A. Gentiles will be judged with the law they have. So now we are letter B, like Gentiles, Jews are sinners. So the reason why he discussed letter A is because Jews ought not to think that the Gentiles will get away with the judgment of God just because they did not have the law of Moshe. But of course, he's trying to confront his fellow Jews. Even if the Gentiles can be excused, because it says their accuser excuse them, but eventually we know they're sinners and they will be accused by the law that they had. But they had the law. That's the point. Like the Gentiles, Jews are sinners. So let's go to verse 17. But if you call yourself a Judaio and rely on the law and boast in God and know His will and approve what is excellent because you are instructed from the law. Now, this is very obvious. Paul was going strong and hard against his fellow Jews. Was being a Jew a source of pride and honor for them? Yes, of course, because they're part of the new covenant. They had God's special revelation. Actually, in chapter 9, verses 4 to 5, Paul said, these are the privileges of becoming a Judaio or a Jew. They are Israelites, and to them belong the adoption. So God made them His children. The glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the worship, and the promises. To them belong the patriarchs, and from their race, according to the flesh, is the Christo, who is God over all, blessed forever. Amen. Christo, who is God over all. That's a direct statement that Yeshua is God. So let's take a look at Isaiah, or Yeshayahu, chapter 48, verses 1 and 2. Hear this, O house of Yaakov, who are called by the name of Yisrael, and who came from the waters of Yehuda, who swear by the name of the Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, but not in truth or right. For they call themselves after the holy city and stay themselves on the Elohim of Israel. The Yahweh of hosts is his name. So here we can see that the Lord is very upset or angry at Israel because they are special people of God, but they are not in truth or right. So I think this is consistent with what Paul is saying here in verses 17 to 18. You pride in becoming Judaios, you have the law, but in the next verses, you disrespect God. Okay, you disrespect the law. So let's go to the questions first. Did they choose to be Jews? No, of course not. Nobody chose to be a Jew or a Gentile. Was it right for them to rely on the law? Well, yes, because that's what they had. And I mean that in a very positive sense. That's what some would always say, especially 119, to rely on the law. It's God's revelation for them. All right? But here in the book of Romans, okay, the problem is actually they're relying on themselves. That they were compliant with the law, which is obviously not. And that's what we will find in the next few verses. So why did they rely on it? Because, of course, that's God's revelation for them. And, of course, this was not absolute. Many of them really failed. And that's why we have this Romans chapter 2 to chapter 3. They have failed. Did they use the law to make themselves look righteous? That's the problem. They did. Okay, especially the religious leaders. Okay, they thought that they're right before God is because they were complying with the rituals, the other laws that they added to the law of the Lord. Did they boast in God to exalt God or themselves? These questions, I just formulated these things. I think you know where this leads. They boasted for themselves. For themselves, not really for God. Instead of boasting for God, if anyone should boast, let him boast in the Lord. But it's all about the Lord, not themselves. But the problem here is it's about themselves. Do Christians brag about their religious denominations in the face of others? Yes, Christians are also guilty, just like these Jews. As if just becoming part of their organization, God looks favorably on them, just because of their organization. As Paul was saying here, it's not about that. It's about you exalting God. Okay? So let's go to verse 18. Is it good to know God's will? Of course it is. And that's what the verse says. And know his will. So Paul wasn't criticizing them for this one. We will find the criticism in the next few verses. Did they follow it? No. They have failed. Did they commend evil ways? Well, the verses here approve what is excellent. I mean, when we have laws here, our laws are trying to be enacted here in the Philippines. Okay, we keep on saying that, yeah, we are pro-life, and hopefully some among us, Christians are divided in this, that we will not be able to enact a law for divorce. Okay, that's a very divisive issue. Still, we are one of those rarest countries that do not have any divorce law. One more thing, abortion. So just because we approve of what is right doesn't mean we act righteously. Okay? But that's still a good thing that we support those kinds of laws, anti-abortion laws, and so on and so forth. Were they sufficiently educated with the law? Let's say yes. Let's say yes. They were sufficiently educated because it says here, you are instructed from the law. Verses 19 and 20. And if you are sure that you yourself are a guide to the blind, a light to those who are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of children, having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth. So Paul was still here from verses 17 to 20, describing the Jews. He wasn't criticizing them yet. That will be in the next verses, 21 and so forth. So what roles did the Jews play? So let's trace that. Guide to the blind, light to those who are in the darkness. That's the second. The third one, instructor of the foolish. And the fourth one, a teacher of children. So that's very artistic way for Paul to describe the Jews. Based on what? Let's look at Isaiah 42 verse 6 to 7. It's here. I am the Yahweh. I have called you in righteousness. I will take you by the hand and keep you. And I will give you as a covenant for the people, a light for the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. So this is Isaiah 42. Now actually, there are at least three interpretations here. One is this applies to the Jews as a nation. Another is this is a messianic prophecy, so this applies to the Lord Yeshua. And number three is both. Because it's only eventually the Lord will be able to fulfill this. The nation would not be able to do so. So the point of quoting here, Yeshayahu chapter 42 verse 6, because it says there, covenant for the people alike to the nations. When you look at this in the Hebrew, this is actually singular. But it still can be applied to Israel, and the Israelites understood it as reference to them. Because even if the singular form was used, it could mean them as a nation. It's still possible. Who did they engage? So what we find here in verse 19, the blind. Number 2, who are in darkness. Number 3, foolish. And number 4, children. What 4 ways were they described? We just answered that. Were the terms demeaning? Well, it depends. You can take it as very demeaning, but it's like this sort of, he was using this to trigger their pride, but at the same time, to use it against them when he gets to the criticism part. What did the sureness, because the word sure appears there in verse 19, make them feel about themselves? Well, they felt so good about it. They felt so honored and privileged. Not just actually privileged, they thought they were deserving of it. So Paul was preparing verses 17 to 20 to hit them. So these are the positive part, in the sense that, okay, this is what you think of yourselves. Maybe you're correct. Yeah, you have biblical support for that they are such kind of people. Did they do well in engaging the blind and those who are in darkness? Not really. If we look at the criticism of the Lord, now, one of the ways of understanding these verses, you can say this is just to all Jews, because he's trying to establish that all Jews are also guilty. But of course, you can also see this or apply this to specifically to the leaders. To the leaders. Because these are the ones who were anti-gospel. So he's addressing them here in his treatise in the letter to the Romans. Matthew chapter 23 verse 15. So this was the Lord's strong confrontation against the scribes and Pharisees. This was during his last week. And it happened in the temple. Sort of, you can say, Yeshua was shouting at them. Of course, he was very brave. And the people were stunned that he confronted them in that way. And he shouted at them and called them hypocrites. 7 criticisms here. So verse 15, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. He's pronouncing judgment of them. Remember, this is the Lord Yeshua. It doesn't mean we can call other people hypocrites. We're not the Lord Yeshua. We're not judges. All right? So don't imitate the Lord Yeshua in this manner that you can call people this way. Maybe you can say that, hey, don't be hypocritical. Or in a general way, like when we say, bato-bato sa langit naman may wagalit. Stones from heaven, whoever gets hit, don't be angry. Just like what many preachers do. He's making a general criticism, okay? So let's just continue reading. For you travel across sea and land to make a single proselyte. So a proselyte is actually a convert to Judaism, okay, to the Jewish religion. And when he becomes a proselyte, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. So, okay, they were really into proselytizing people, and no matter how far that person was, they would go and reach out to that person. But the problem is, you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. You make him worse. So they didn't do a good job in becoming a light, a guide to the blind, and a light for those who are in the darkness. So how about why? Yeshayahu chapter 56 verse 10, his watchmen are blind. They are all without knowledge. They are all silent dogs. They cannot bark. Dreaming, lying down, loving to slumber, to rest. Okay, so that's the problem. That is the problem. So I think that explains it. Verse 20, instruction of the foolish, a teacher of the children having in the law the embodiment of knowledge and truth. Who appointed them as instructors? We read in the other slide that we have biblical basis, at least in the Old Testament in Yeshayahu, that God appointed them as instructors. So you can take that as God's appointment for them. And how can they be a light and a guide if they were not appointed by God? All right? How foolish were the Gentiles for them? Because they have been called foolish, an instructor of the foolish. So basically, this refers to the Gentiles. I'll let you answer that question. How foolish were the Gentiles for them? Okay. Was Pablo talking to the Jews as a whole, or was he especially targeting their leaders? I mentioned this a while ago. Probably he was targeting the leaders. But of course, this was also applicable to those who listen to their leaders. They have become just like their leaders. Did the Jews take it too far when they had the embodiment of knowledge and truth? I don't think so. I don't think so. But it's their source of pride. They think because they had the law, which is the embodiment of knowledge of truth, okay, they said, we can teach this. We can teach this. But there are many of the clergy, okay, from the Old Testament, they pride themselves in becoming a rabbi because it's a unique accomplishment to be called a rabbi. Well, didaskalos actually is a general term for teacher. Sometimes even school teachers are called didaskalos. But in Matthew chapter 23, verse 8, a while ago we just read verse 15, but in verse 8, but you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, or didaskalos, and you are all brothers. So basically, what he's saying to the apostles is, even the apostles themselves are not to raise themselves up, just like replacing the Jewish rabbis with this new order. No, only the Lord Yeshua is the source of knowledge and truth. So even the apostles are subject to the Lord Yeshua. Of course, certainly they're his students, but they are not to elevate themselves above their brothers. So it's going to be different. That's why don't let people call you rabbi as with a very high estimation. Only Jesus should be exalted in the Christian community. All right, that's the idea here. Verse 21, you then who teach, didasko, others, do you not teach yourself? So we come now to the criticism part. Do you not teach yourself? So we have rhetorical questions here from Pablo. While you preach, keriso, sometimes you hear people say kerigma, or the preaching. While you preach against stealing, do you steal? Klepto. You know this term? You who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? So, okay, what are the obvious answers to these rhetorical questions? The answer is, yes, they're guilty of these things. They steal, they don't teach themselves, they commit adultery, and they rob temples. How did Pablo know that these people commit these transgressions? Remember, he was also a Pharisee, so he knew that there are religious leaders who are not doing the right thing. You can call him to be an insider as well. Can the Jews or their leaders deny this? No, no. Paul knew them too well. Which temples are these? Well, it's plural. We cannot say this is the second temple during their time. I think since Paul was referring to the church in Rome, he was a missionary and there were many Jewish communities within the diaspora. He knew that some of them, when they are able to convert them to Judaism, they do rob temples. I mean, precious things in the temples. Why did they rob temples? You know, it's a temptation for anybody. Let's go to this main point. How precious were the things in there? Very precious. I mean, finest gold, pure gold. So it's a rich treasury. Temples. We're talking about pagan temples here. Were they the only ones robbing temples? Actually, no. Actually, no. Many people will actually steal from the temple. But, you know, for the Jews, they're not allowed to go to pagan temples because that would defile them. But they rob temples. Pablo knew they were doing this as well. Not just pagans, okay, not just other people. Even the Jewish leaders were doing this. What should have they done? Deuteronomy 7:25, the carved images of their gods you shall burn with fire. You shall not covet the silver or gold that is on them or take it for yourselves. So exactly the opposite. Against this command. That's what they did. Lest you be ensnared by it, and they fell into that snare. For it is an abomination to the Yahweh your Elohim. So I think this really hurt them, this exposure of Pablo. Verse 23 and 24, you who boast in the law, dishonor God by breaking the law. For as it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the nations because of you. That's in Yechezkel chapter 36 verse 20. So after exposing their sins, can they deny the accusation of breaking the law? No. No. What did Jacob say about breaking the law? Chapter 2 verse 10, whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become liable for all of it. So they have broken the whole law. Yechezkel exposed the guilt of the people of Israel, which explained their destruction and exile to Babylon. Did they change after 500 years since the exile? Apparently, not so much. They were still breaking the law. Can God get that angry again? Yes, He could. And in fact, He did. So we knew that the temple was destroyed in 8070, and eventually they lost their nation in about, I think, 132, the next Jewish Roman war. So let's go to our last point. External signs do not make one a real Jew. What is this external sign? Verse 25. For circumcision indeed is of value if you obey the law. But if you break the law, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. So what is circumcision? Okay, so this is the cutting of the foreskin of men, of male, so including those who were born and children, but only for males, not females. So you find here in Genesis chapter 17, verse 10. So what is the function or meaning of that circumcision? This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh. So this is a physical practice of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. So it's the sign of the covenant. If you look at the sign of the Mosaic covenant is Shabbat. With Noah, it was the bow of God. Just reminded me of, it says there, bow of God. And we translated it as rainbow. Some say, no, it's not rainbow. It's the bow of God. So what does that mean? I don't know. What makes it meaningful, circumcision, if you obey the law? What makes it uncircumcision if you break the law? Is this literal or figurative? Uncircumcision. Of course, this is figurative. Once you're circumcised, you're circumcised. Or was it a comparison? Yes, it was a comparison. To whom? It's like you are uncircumcised. It doesn't make you different from the pagans. Was that offensive to be called uncircumcised? Yes, it was offensive to the Jews. Remember when David was confronting Goliath? You uncircumcised, he called him, because that means he's unclean. Did one transgression of the law lead to uncircumcision? Well, this is what he meant by this. As far as God is concerned, your circumcision becomes uncircumcision. Verse 26. So, if a man who is uncircumcised keeps the precepts of the law, will not his circumcision be regarded as circumcision? So, this is a rhetorical question again. The answer is yes. Will the Jews agree with Pablo here? Probably not. Probably they will disagree with Pablo here. Will Pablo be still right? Yes, he's correct in verse 26. So, logizomai was a technical term in commercial or financial settings, especially in accounting. So, that is a formal term. Was it a stretch for Pablo to use that word? Regarded, logizomai, as circumcision. So, rather than literally uncircumcised, but you are considered or regarded as uncircumcision. Paul was talking about the Gentiles here. They were not physically circumcised, but in the eyes of God, they are circumcised. Or was he using it loosely? I don't think so. Loosely in the sense that it doesn't have to be literal. But Pablo was very serious here. He said in 1 Corinthians or Corinthos chapter 7 verse 19, circumcision is nothing and uncircumcision is nothing. Again, the Jews would disagree with him here. But he has a point here. Keeping God's command is what counts. You may be physically circumcised, but if you are not following God, you are also guilty. Then who is physically or physis uncircumcised, but keeps the law, will judge you who have the written code. Who had the written code? The Jews. And they had the written code and circumcision, but break the law. Wow. The uncircumcised will be judging the circumcised. That's a very strong statement. If in verse 25 uncircumcision was figurative, how did Pablo qualify the uncircumcision here in verse 27? So what's the qualification? But keeps the law. What kind of law? The Moshe? No. The law that they had. Okay? Now, if they keep the law that they had, does that mean there's justification through the law, the universal law? That's not what Paul was pointing out here. We'll get into that some other time. How can they keep the law when they did not have the law? That's what we read in verse 15. Because they were obeying their conscience. They follow their conscience, and their thoughts excuse them because they obeyed the law. But keep the law will judge. Now, this could be double meaning. Because we know, again, as we have pointed out earlier, there are items in the Mosaic law that's actually part of the universal moral law. There's continuity. There's continuity. Just like the examples that Pablo there given in the previous verses, stealing, committing adultery. Those are part of the universal law that continue to the Old Testament. Is this the written code? Again, it could be double meaning. Do the Gentiles who follow the law written in their hearts have the right or in position to judge the Jews? The Jews will say no. But as far as Paul was concerned here, they will judge the Jews. Is this not objectionable to them? It is objectionable to the Jews. Is this literal judging or figurative? I think this is figurative. That the Gentiles, by their compliance with the law, they didn't have to talk to the Jews, but by their example, by their fear of God, just like Cornelius and many others in the New Testament who showed fear in God, and then they heard the gospel. They didn't have to condemn the Jews verbally, but through their compliance with the law, that will hit the Jews and judge the Jews. Verse 28, for no one is a Judaio who is merely one outwardly, nor is circumcision outward, phaneros, and physical, sarx. But a Judaio is one inwardly, kryptos, and circumcision is a matter of the heart, by the Spirit, not by the letter. His praise is not from man, but from God. All right. So was Pablo defining what it meant to be a Judaio, or was he giving a deeper and real meaning to it? I think he was redefining in a sense that he's giving a better definition of the Judaio with regards to the law. So he's giving a deeper and real meaning what it means to be a Judaio. Is this objectionable? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Paul was right here. Does this go against the spirit of the law? No. In fact, it does go so well with the spirit of the law. That's the idea, that you comply with it. Remember what becoming a Judaio meant for them. Well, Pablo will push this further when he goes to chapter 9. Let's read that part, verses 6 and 7. For not all who are descendants from Israel belong to Israel, even though they were physically Israelites. And not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring. So remember, not all of the offspring of Abraham were Israelites. So those who were born through Jacob were privileged to be born from Jacob. The Lord Yeshua also said something like this in Yohanan chapter 8 verse 39 as he was arguing with the Pharisees. They answered him, the Pharisees, Abraham is our father. Yeshua said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing the works Abraham did. But they did not. But they did not. Remember, Abraham did not have the law of Moshe because he lived 400 years before him. What is the opposite of phaneros in this? It is kryptos. Now that sounds familiar to us. It literally means hidden or secret. Should the Jew be cryptic about his being a real Jew? No, that's not the idea here. That's not the idea here. Even though the word kryptos means hidden, but in this context it means inwardly. It's hidden inside the heart. Okay, because you cannot open up the body just to look into the heart. It refers to the emotions or the thoughts and the conscience. How can the heart be circumcised? In Deuteronomy 30 verse 6, and the Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring, so that you will love the Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. So it's God who's going to change your heart if you just listen to Him. Is this literal or figurative? So of course this is spiritual. Who can circumcise our hearts? God can. So ask Him, Lord, change my heart, because it's just so stubborn. Can the inscripted law change the heart? Well, it remains outside. That's why you have to write it in your hearts. We discussed that earlier. So you have to let God change your heart. So the Lord will write His law from the tablets into your heart. Is there anything wrong with the praise from man? Well, in this case, that's what people were looking for. That people applaud them for complying with the law of Moshe. But that is just external. They were still doing the bad stuff, like what we find in the previous verses. Does God praise man? Well, in this case, it says yes. That means God is approved. That it means God is happy for them that they are circumcised in the heart. They have changed. They are in the Spirit. They are following Him. They're obedient. So in what sense? Just like in this case, Actually, there are many Gentiles who were coming into the faith, and that really made many Ayudayos jealous. Jealous. So God was praising those who were coming to Him. How does that feel if you are praised by God? Of course, that is very comforting. Lord, thank you that even though I'm a sinner, you have accepted me. So thank you for loving me this much. Okay, it feels so good. So those are our 3 points. Gentiles will be judged with the law they have. So basically, they have the universal moral law, even from the time of Adam. Like Gentiles, Jews are sinners. So they will also be condemned. And in fact, God will be using the Gentiles to judge them, the Gentiles who were responding to the gospel. More of that in chapter 9. External signs do not make one a real Jew. So circumcision does not change your heart. That's merely external. What you need is the written scriptures in your heart, and God's going to change you. So join me next time when we go to part 5.